Westcliffe, Johannesburg. It will bring together chief executive officers, chief information officers, chief financial officers, and as well as the chairpersons of leading companies and financial institutions across all industry sectors from South Africa and other parts of the continent. Now, the Goldman Sachs conference follows South Africa's successful hosting of an investment conference in October 2018, where South Africa and international firms made a broad range of pledges to establish or expand operations in South Africa. Let's go there live.
Mobilize up to almost 300 billion rand, and an economic advisor who focuses on all matters economic. And with that, we will be able to have line of sight of what happens in the various ministries, but also in the various sectors of our economy. I now want to focus on sectors and just not have a look broadly at what happens in the economy. Look at every sector where there is weakness and laggard growth. We should understand what gives rise to it and see the extent to which things can be egged on to get things to perform better. So coordination is going to be there, and it's going to be focused, and it's going to be focusing on removing obstacles. The regulatory framework in our country, I must admit, sadly, that it impedes a lot of business activity. Small and medium enterprises always complain that it takes them forever to get a permit for this and that, and we need to remove all that. You spoke about the visas. This thing has gone dead. It's not my fault. I hope you can still hear me. You spoke about the visas. The visa issue has been raised repeatedly with us, and we said that it should be addressed. There are still remnants of visa difficulties that people have. We're going to remove all that now. We want to open up the country, and there are quite a number of companies that want to bring in their officials, their colleagues here, and they're finding great difficulty. So we're going to resolve all those issues, issues that are known, not only to us, but to me as well. And we're going to act on them, and we're going to make sure that we remove all those impediments and all those constraints and difficulties. So all that will then be looked at from a central point of view, and the presidency will be driving all that.
By the way, Minister, was not an Eskom blackout. It's on.
The lights have been on for quite a while.
Thank you for that, Mr. President. Maybe just to stick with the institutional design of the economy, as opposed to the policy coordination. You're about to announce both the structure and the composition of your cabinet. What can you tell us about that would translating this confidence that you have into a new faster path for the economy? Is there anything that you can share with us at this point? And we understand you may be not wanting to talk about structure of cabinet and so on until you're ready to do that, but anything that you could indicate to investors? They're obviously watching this cabinet, this new government, the administration, the institutional design with a great amount of interest.
Well, you yourself are saying, you know that I may not want to talk about certain things. You're too inquisitive this morning. We are going to be making quite a number of announcements shortly. The National Assembly meets next week to elect the Speaker, the President, and all that. Then the inauguration happens, and then we announce the cabinet. But firstly, we announce the reconfigured cabinet structure, and thereafter we then announce the people who will be occupying key positions. And what we will be seeking to do is to out with an institutional framework that is going to serve our country best, our economy well, and ensure that we focus on economic growth. The key problem that we face as a country is low economic growth, and it all revolves around the economy. As said is the economy is stupid, and that's what it is. It is that we're going to be focusing more on ways of generating more economic growth, creating jobs. So the structure that we have of government is going to speak to that. And the coordination which we just spoke about is also going to be seeking to address that. And we'll be seeking to get people, men and women, who have great competence, great capability to serve the needs of the people of South Africa and to ensure economic growth. And that is the key focus that we will be looking at as we make all these announcements. As regards the bigger issues, we will do that at the State of the Nation address, when we then for the next 5 years. The plans are already in place. The NDP is of our overarching plan. And the manifesto that we issued before the elections is a sub-plan below the National Development Plan, and it gives us the focus. And the State of the Nation address will then be talking to how we are going to go about implementing all those broad plans that we have. Some people say we have plan fatigue in our country. I don't believe so. The National Development Plan is the lodestar, and all other sub-plans hang off the National Development Plan. And this is what we're going to focus on. One of the key problems we've had in our country is lack of implementation. And we are now going to focus on implementation. And I've been saying, I don't want to hear any excuses from anyone. The plans are there, things must be done, and we must focus on what needs to be done without any excuses. And if we don't have the capacity, the capability, move out of the way, we'll get people who can actually implement and make sure that things get done. That's my approach.
So, Mr. President, I think I can confidently say and represent the people in the room are right behind you on the plan, on the implementation of the National Development Plan. There's very little commentary in the public markets that would criticize the policy formulation broadly. I think people have confidence in the broad policy direction. Obviously, the implementation, as you say, is what we want to see more and more. I would even go so far as to say there's a recognition in the markets that South Africa is a mixed economy. Yes. The ANC's policy is to have a mixed free market economy, and it's not a state interventionist pure model. And in many senses, the market wants the mixed economy to function and to work. So that leads on to the state-owned enterprise segment of the conversation, if you like, where people are very worried about this becoming an albatross around your neck, that the state-owned enterprises that you are inheriting now in your sixth administration, however it has been developed and caused, is a very significant challenge. And the biggest elephant in the room is clearly Eskom. So I think if we could just spend a few minutes and dedicate some of your to Eskom to fix it. Clearly you've inherited a problem, a fiscal problem, and a management problem that you've inherited over a long period. You've put in place a new board and new management, and we've had some unfortunate situations like crisis. It result in level 4 at some point, and we have very high levels of debt. So the question is Eskom over what period, and is this is the possibility of arresting this problem, which has the potential to affect the entire fiscal situation in South Africa?
Yeah, some 6 weeks or 2 months ago, we had a real crisis situation with Eskom. Had the floods in Mozambique, and that almost 9,000 megawatts, and we had a problem with of our own power station, boilers and all that. It was perfect storm. Because I want to demonstrate the resilience that we've always had whenever we have hit rock bottom. People that it was going to have a negative impact on the elections and all that. We were able to get immediately our defense force was the pilots up, floods had held them down, and we were able to also ensure that the boilers in our power stations work well. So load shedding sort of rocked the country a few days, and we should be okay. So says Mr. Public and he does. He sends me a report every morning. About 7:30 on my mobile phone. Power stations are okay. So many are weak and all that. Great stuff. It should do this. But having said, what are the challenges? And the challenges are management issues. I mean, those who the board, the management, governance processes in Eskom were just destroyed. They started right at the top, at the higher top. It went to at the department, that is. So the major problem, the management and tuning of the staff, and many employed in terms of what the rate when we compared to others in the world, we overstaffed. That is, and we have to deal with our unions. It's very doing and just throwing people out willy-nilly in the challenges. Big company, I think, in the history of this country, just debt 30 billion rand. So, problem that we have to deal with. And Eskom is just too big to fail. It's just too important to fail. It's just overreaching in the life of holds the fortunes, economic level, social level, country's life in its hands. So therefore, all those challenges. And it is to this we said, one of the steps that we've got to take, we've got to work on a credible business plan for Eskom, the message in. The plan is in place. It has been tested, it's been evaluated, it is credible and can be implemented, and it is already being implemented. We've got to have a team that also we have strengthening as well. We've got to have but we address the issue of the debt, which is precisely what we're doing now. Our treasury with cost important and too big scale, we are not going to allow it. Because if this economy fails, this country also fails. We're not going to allow that. We're going to come up with plans, the nation address, to the extent that we can, the level of assurance and confidence on how we're going to do it. So one of the steps or measures that we're going to embark upon is it's now been brought in order to shore it up, in order to address all these challenges with structure, to align it to be the world. They've restructured entities that focus on certain aspects of transmission as well, and able to bring partnerships with others. Now, make clear that it is valued national asset. We are not privatizing. We are restructuring Eskom. That will also allow the private sector to be our partners. Our partners in generation, our partners already in distribution. There are already quite a lot of distribution actors in the. And so generation lends itself also to having a number of partners who can participate. We've come up with a very good plan. The room is always to be the debt. Address that. And we will address it in a way by a key statement. It is too big to fail, and it is far too important to fail. We're going to all the key plans, and fossil fuel providers, who are the coal miners, a role. Labor will have to play a role. The government itself has to play a role. The private a role. Own communities. Where my state of the nation earlier, we all have to participate in this problem, and there are sacrifices that we will have to make. Because without an Eskom, then our stop. So if we want our economy to continue pumping, what was feared most, load shedding, less power, mines to our factories and all that, has not ensued as people have feared. And I've been to a number of mines who tell me that whenever there are challenges, they are informed and they are able to their own processes. It's not been rock bottom, like we about what happens in other countries. I remember years ago, California had a all doom and gloom and solve the problem. We are going to do exactly the same here. And the resilience of the government, of our various institutions, is strong enough to be able to withstand the calamity that people may fear around this.
And maybe on that, just to comment that I think the financial markets, without speaking for them, broadly, A, very interested, and B, willing to participate in a good solution. And if there's a sustainable solution that results in a sustainable gearing ratio for Eskom, I think you will see the financial markets to both Eskom and the sovereign in a. So I think everyone needing a solution and wanting to get to that solution as effectively as possible.
Financial markets are ready and willing to participate. Thank you so much.
You omitted solution. Okay. Good thing we went to a National Treasury meeting yesterday. Was the National we discussed everything but SAA and other state assets. Eskom is so overwhelming. I wondered if you wanted to make some comments about non-state-owned enterprises before we leave that subject matter, and ask this simple question. It was interesting you mentioned private sector in the ruling part. Is it if you involve the sector, let's say operating and managing African Airways, for example, that be a terrible outcome for the ruling party see to participate in the presence solving for the.
Now, in the ruling party, we embrace the notion of the sector to be our partner. Since in 2017, when I was in this, we should build a social with private community, and of course, in many of the things that we do. This is what has the work that I've been doing to say I want partnerships. Partnerships help to resolve problems. So it's no longer a swear word, and it is not a swear word. For food. So we see great value in working with private. Now, what we've done is to set up a state enterprise council, which is chaired by myself, which the state-owned country, largely because we've had all these challenges in our state-owned enterprises. And one of the issues we're going to be looking at very quickly is how partnerships with not only with labor but also with the sector on how we can bring the private sector on board, to do what they do best, to help us run our corporations, to even get to a point take equity positions. There are quite a number of enterprises where they can take equity positions, and I've informed my colleagues that look at what the being communist country in China, they have been able to bring in the private sector, equity partners in China Mobile and telecoms company, list them on the New York Stock Exchange. It's the trajectory that we're following, because there's a great deal of value to be extracted when there's a partnership and a collaboration between private sector and the key issue now. I think what is the swear word has been privatization, because people have feared privatization because where it has happened, it has led to job losses, led to defocusing public enterprises from their, if you like, developmental mandate of meeting the needs and sense of ordinary people. But we want to do things in a very smart way. The smart thing to do is to work with private to developmental needs. Make sure that our people get water, they get electricity, and the cost of living is also brought down. So, great value are going to do.
With the 5 minutes or so left, I just want to touch on two issues. You briefly touched on youth unemployment,
yes,
and the land issue. You can go on to the youth unemployment issue. You know I'm a passionate co-chairman of Youth Initiative, which you have led and championed. Very much thanks to all the people in the audience are going to ask themselves the question, how can they participate in the youth employment? Help us reach our targets of 1 million youth interns into South African businesses. In the way, we have about 20,000 youth in it. And I know your office is very busy, not just on coordinating for youth on a number of different bases side of the Youth Employment Service. So that's just make some comments about youth. Well, clearly it was a major elections. Young people come out. Some did, but many didn't. And their participation in the political and economic.
Yes, young people, I guess it's not only in our country, but also certainly on the African continent, disaffected, alienated. in the main, the economies of our countries are absorbing them into job situations. In our own country, after years of being prevented from into skills, and they now get those doors of cities, colleges, and they go to institutions, they come out with certificates, degrees, and they don't get jobs. Them enthusiasm, in voting, and all that. So it's a challenge because almost 60% of young people in the country, we've got to address that. Even once again in the job market, and many of those people who are lost jobs are young people. So initially, the Youth Employment Service and a number of other initiatives, such as preparing young people for the job market or the job situation or the world of work, are valuable initiatives, and African companies want, obviously, to invest to young people, them into the job situation. In the main, most of them come out of universities or college without any skill whatsoever. And they feel aggrieved that whenever they seek jobs, they are experienced, and when they say no, they say, we don't want. And all of us here, in our first jobs, we had no experience. In fact, what we knew companies that we could have worked for, but we were absorbed in, we were, mentored and given an. So this is precisely what we are saying to South African companies: open up opportunities, give young people. We are going to be seeking ways, opening up more opportunities, and getting the skills to be more focused, so that they do skills acquisition that is around areas that are needed by the economy. And we found that where young people bothered to get that are needed by the economy, they get jobs. The engineering field, technical field. That is now the education trajectory that we have now embarked on. Now starting at school level. Schools. Young people can get into school at year 8 of school life to start stuff. Either be a plumber, to be an electrical person, to be whatever. So they learn, amazed. It's being taken. Now channeling their children after year 7 into those type of high school. So that already appetite. We now as companies, we now as government need to open up opportunities and channels for our young people to get into very skilled and all that. So, but youth unemployment is a huge headache. We are addressing it. Just to say the youth service, credit has to be given to yourself and a person like Steve Costa, various companies. Nedbank was one of the companies that took, at one fell swoop, took 3,130 something people, and they're going to keep. And Tech was telling me that of those that they took, 97% got jobs after spending the full year of this youth employment service. So this campaign that we are on, more traction. I threw a challenge at the boffins of business here, like Colin. I said 1 million jobs within 3 years. Opportunity for young people within 3 years. We're still far off from that, but we get in a wonderful, terrible way, because now companies are beginning to do the real quality stuff rather than just adding numbers. And I think we will. And there will be many other initiatives that will be focused on young people. That's what all of us should be doing.
By the way, for the audience, I think you've seen it. As actually these unions quickly go into creating small businesses, and the small businesses they employ. So people, there's a ripple effect together with the SME fund that's been driving. I think these are ways in which the business community is linking arms with the president in his.
And you must tell them about the story of this young person who went to learn baking. Young man went to learn baking. He was baking cupcakes. And one hotel took him on. They taught him all that. And in no time, left them, set up his own business. He employed 12 people. And he intends to employ another 20 people. So a person who's like 19 years started his own business and he's just flying and cupcakes online, and,
Internet of Things. Mr. President, the final question, because I think we'd be remiss if we didn't touch on it with the question. It's the most difficult. You call it and obviously this is something that the investors should be worrying about, or is this going to be well-managed outcome in which security of tenure is secured for any investors who come into South Africa, and what will the next couple of years hold on the land debate?
Yeah. No, I would say investors should not be worried about this. We and as you've said, you've got to deal with it. And I often tell people that people must must get to know that this party, which I lead, formed in 1912. It was not formed for vote. It was formed. The originators or the founders of the ANC said, land taken away from us. We were moved away from our land. We were dispossessed of our land, and some of it happened brutally, some of it happened by just being pushed off. And one person who became the Secretary General of the ANC wrote a book, Saul Plaatje, that people in South Africa, black people, suffered as they were being moved land, and it was a real story, he said, a book of a couple that was moved off the land in the middle of the night. They were traveling in their donkey cart, and their baby died. I think a few months died, and they had a place to bury the child, and they buried the child by the side, because they no longer had land to bury even their own child. And he says, that evoked is almost like unbearable. And so the ANC have been end question, and even had and must come back then. Time when various international documents were universal, added the vote, the issue of the right to vote, so it became a wholesome sort of organization. And the constitutional architecture that we put in place was such that it land that the dawn of democracy in our country during the negotiations was the land issue. So it never died. It remained bubbling right at the bottom. Over the past 25 years, fully. So at the conference said, we need to address sin. It causes a great deal of pain to the people of our country. Let us find ways of addressing it. One of those ways the conference came up with was that expropriate land without compensation. a debate in the country. The debate has ensued and people have used. But in the course of it all, people have come up with a number of interesting, even farmers and so on. They've said, we don't want to be part of the party. We want to make them. We actually want to people who participate in an integrated solution that will lead to something that's good for the country. But it's a reform, but we must make it does not have a negative effect on the economy, does not lower production of food security. So those were the key that were put in place. And it is with that the debate then ensued. It is now going into Parliament. And the Constitution as it is now does allow land to be expropriated, as all countries have in the world. And to a point where, yes, even without compensation, it can happen under certain circumstances. Now, we are saying here in South Africa, we've always adhered to the rule of law. We have a constitution. And we are going to insist that everything is done in terms of our constitution, in terms of the rule of law. And I've said repeatedly ad nauseum that there will never be land grabs. We will not allow land grabs to happen. We will ensure that the process of land reform takes place in an orderly manner, in a manner where everyone fully participates. So I've often said too, even foreign investors have no fear. And I've said, there's just no way we can invite foreign investors to come to our country. We say, come, invest, and tomorrow we take your land away. That is not going to happen. And that is not sensible. That is not something that any sensible person does. But at the same time, we're going to pass a law which we call the Expropriation Act in Parliament. Every country has a law like that. We've always had that type of law, and we're now revamping it and we're aligning it to the current imperatives. And that law is now going to say these are the types and parcels of land that can actually be looked at for the expropriation process. And we've got large parcels of land in our country, and a number of those are owned by state-owned enterprises, municipalities and all that. In the urban areas, people want land to build homes and houses, and most of that is owned by municipalities or state-owned enterprises. We're going to be focusing on that. And so therefore, the process is going to be orderly. The process is going to be in terms of our rule of law and our constitution. Because if it isn't, we have a robust constitution. Some people say we've got the best constitution in the world. A justice from the United States said, President, we often look at your constitution when we seek to give more meaning to our own constitution, because you've got the best constitution. So our constitution is such that if we do things in a way that is reckless, that is outside the parameters of our constitution or the law, South Africans can take us to court. And where they have, they've often won. So there are great protections in our legal or constitutional architecture. And it is to that end that I say, we say to people, do not fear. This is a process that has to address the original sin. But as it addresses the original sin, it takes into account the current imperatives and does it carefully in terms of the rule of law, and ensures that we do not act irrationally. That's the word they use, irrationally. You see, with me as well as president, they often say, my advisors often say, President, you must always seek to act rationally. Because if you don't act rationally, the courts can rule against you. And those are the imperatives that we're looking at. So I'm quite relaxed. We've got to have land reform. We've got to address the original sin. But I I am clear on one thing. We've got to do it in terms of the rule of law. We are not a banana republic. We are a Nelson Mandela's republic. And we will do it in accordance with the ethos that Nelson Mandela lived by and stood for. That's it.
That's absolutely a wonderful note to end on, Mr. President, to just sum up by saying, I know you always like to say that the glass is half full, not half empty. I know by the end of the 5 years, the glass will be full. And we wish you everything of the best over the next few months and the next 5 years. I know that South Africa is fully behind you. The investor community is fully with you. And we wish you well, and many thanks for coming to the conference today. A round of applause.
Thank you. So we go.
As we leave, if everybody can stay seated for us, and we'll escort the President out. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.